And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you now to our next panel, and which is going to be all about the secret sauce of community builders in APAC. We have Lalitha, who's moderating, and from Malaysia, we have Yue from Japan, we have Melissa from Australia, and we also have Michelle from Australia. And yeah, without further ado, Lalitha, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Belinda. So we're just waiting on Michelle to join us and make sure we've got all 4 panelists on board. But while we're waiting for Michelle to get started, I will say a quick hello and then throw the floor over to my other 2 panelists who are over here to quickly introduce ourselves so that you all know who on earth is talking to you. So as Belinda introduced, my name is Lalitha. I'm the Regional Director of Community at Techstars, and I'm based in Kuala Lumpur. I've been supporting the growth of the community and startup ecosystem development that we have in the Asia Pacific region for the last 5.5 years. So it's wonderful to be talking about a topic that is very dear to my heart with a group of amazing women who are doing the same across the region. So with that, I'm going to pass the floor over to Yue to say hello and tell us who she is and where she's from and where on earth she's broadcasting out of.
Awesome. So I'm Yue from Plug and Play Japan. Just a little bit about Plug and Play in general. We're a venture capital and startup accelerator headquartered in Silicon Valley, California. But we've been in Japan for about 3 years now. And our Japan headquarters is in Tokyo. That's where I'm calling from today. I'm calling from Tokyo. We're a global company and have 35 locations worldwide, and including APAC locations like Singapore and China. I'm the community manager at Plug and Play Japan, mostly in charge of planning and executing events, online and offline events, and nurturing community of like different stakeholders, since we have international and domestic startups and also large corporations that we work with, also venture capital firms that we work with, like a bunch of different stakeholders, right? And I also work on expanding the community itself with, by working with different organizations within the startup ecosystem in Japan and outside of Japan. So that's kind of just what I do, and I'm really excited to be part of this discussion because obviously community building is like a, huge thing. And we've been talking and having these kind of like discussions and events on this topic internally within the ecosystem in Japan. But I haven't had this type of like cross-border panel on this topic, apart from just like Plug and Play Global internally. So really excited to learn about what other community leaders are doing in their own countries. So yeah. Excited to be here.
Okay, so it looks like Michelle is having a little bit of tech issues, but no worries. We will start the conversation and then we'll just give her the floor basically when she finally gets in.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
So Melissa, over to you.
Okay,
tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I can try to make my intro super long to wait for Michelle. I can tell my life story.
We can get into a little bit of a conversation. We'll fill her in as soon as she gets in.
So yes, hi everyone from Sydney, Australia. I'm currently the head of community for AirTree Ventures. So that basically means I look after all of our community engagement, but also all of our external communications as well. So, our PR, our marketing, our content. And so what's AirTree Ventures? AirTree is one of Australia's largest and most active venture capital funds. We focus on investing in startups that are out of either Australia or New Zealand. They have to have a connection to the country. So most of our businesses, they are founded by either Aussies or Kiwis, as we like to call them. But we have invested in some businesses out of the US where Australia or New Zealand is like one of their main markets. For example, a drone company called Drone Deploy. And yeah, we've been very fortunate to back some of Australia's biggest tech success stories like Canva and Cloud Guru. For
Ooh,
myself,
all
yeah.
the good SaaS stuff.
Yes, we're very lucky. I mean, when we started 5 years ago, there was barely any venture capital firms. So it helps that we started early at a time when we, basically anyone who was getting funding was funded by either us or two other of our peers. And so for me personally, before I came into this role, I was heading up community and partnerships for a blockchain community. So that's where a lot of community that I deal with was, sort of a split between the tech, the engineers that love blockchain versus the sort of trader bros who love crypto. So, that was very fun trying to marry everything together and also working very much globally. And then before that, I was a program manager at the University of New South Wales. So they had a tech accelerator. So I guess my work there probably would be very similar to what Yue would do. So it's basically like an accelerator. And so I would work with the founders. So I worked with hundreds of startups, but also help them connect to corporates, governments, investors. And also, I guess personally, I was born in China, so a lot of my work, I've been able to connect the Australian ecosystem with the Chinese or the Asian ecosystem. Yes, and also my husband's quite active in Malaysia. He's got a business operations there. So KL is actually my third home after Sydney and my hometown.
Shut up!
Yeah.
We'll connect better after
yes,
this.
I miss you. I miss the durian so much.
Okay, so I mean, Michelle is still having a little bit of trouble, but for those of you that are waiting on her, she is the developer community manager at GitHub, and she's based in Melbourne. She does a bunch of amazing things. She's a founder in her own right. She's also an active journalist and streamer, and she's all kinds of awesome. So as soon as she gets on, she can tell you all of that and what she does on her own. But while we're waiting for that, I'm going to get into the conversation that we are supposed to have on hand, which is that community is everything. And between all of us, I think we do a lot of interactions with quite a spectrum of people in terms of building community. So everybody from community leaders to founders to corporates to and before you came into this, Melissa, universities. So we have a real spectrum of how we've engaged that entrepreneurial stack. So I guess before we dive into SaaS and community building and all of that, maybe let's talk a little bit about how do you, when you're getting into the work that you're doing in community building, how do you approach or find your tribe or that starter people, right, that form the culture of the communities that you eventually build foundations on? Big question. We're starting with the big one. Anybody can go first, by the way. Don't all jump at once.
Okay, I guess for me.
Well, I'll start then.
Okay, you say it. Okay.
Go ahead, Lalitha. No, go ahead.
You need to throw to someone.
After you.
Okay, Yue, start off. Melissa, add on.
So I think plug and play is like an interesting space because we have so many layers of different community like stakeholders, right? So we have domestic startups and international startups, domestic meaning Japanese startups, and like large corporations in Japan that are looking to work with startups, and like other VCs and mentors and like service partners, a bunch of like startups that we have, right? So it was my first approach was to understand like what kind of stakeholders they are, and kind of getting like a picture of like who are involved and how we can help, and their values and their pains and what they're looking for, how we can give value to them. So that was the way for us to figure out the bigger picture of what it is and how we can fit into that the community of like the circle. That's kind of how I approached it. And once you understand like who's in that community, you kind of start, forming what kind of content, what kind of events you need to meet their needs. And that's it for me. Yeah.
No, I think that rings so true, right? So find like it is a big spectrum as well of who you can approach to be part of that community, but understanding the why and who your initial and core niche is, and then building around that. Everybody else that comes in, it's a bonus, and it's wonderful to grow that network in a more horizontal way, but at the same time making sure that you're able to dive deep into your core users or core customers, core people's needs is really what ends up adding that value, because there are so many as well communities that are available. Melissa, anything you want to add?
Sure.
Yeah, so I guess if we're coming at it from the perspective, you're building a community because you're selling a SaaS product, right? Like it sounds very businessy, but the reality is you first.
I guess we should talk about it because we're on the SaaStock.
Yeah, exactly. So then it's
right.
like you identify your customer, right? And from your different stages, you're identifying different customers. I would say if you're in a very early growth stage, you want to identify like your first 100 customers. These are going to be like your champions, right? Like they love and need your product. So you sort of find that niche. And then once you have that set, you can sort of expand it to ever bigger groups of people. And then, you identify what the profiles are for those people. And then you about what are those communities, like what do they actually need. So authenticity and understanding them is really important. So, like whatever you're building will actually be useful for them.
Yeah. And I think that's a great segue into my next question, which is, so I think definitely resonating with the fact that authenticity and understanding your people is such a core value that you should have. It really helps people as well kind of set you apart from what's true and what's kind of, surface level, superficial communities that bring you on board to just sell you the product, as opposed to whether you're learning or growing with that community, even if you're just a customer. And on that note, for the many, many community managers that I'm sure we have on this call, and from your experience in working with founders that are part of SaaStock communities, what are some common mistakes that you've seen community builders kind of pitfall into as they start their journey in building communities that are also customers in a way, right? Melissa, let's start with you.
I guess I'll probably point out one. I think there's actually a lot that goes into how you would design the interactions within a community to get the optimum amount of. You need to set enough frameworks so that people know what they're there for and what's happening. But you need to empower the community itself to do enough things and to be themselves and to create enough things so that they feel ownership of it. So it's kind of like you can't just, as a community builder, expect, oh, I put a group of people together and that's a community. A group of people together is not a community. But at the same time, you can't expect that, oh, I want them to behave X, Y, Z way and it's all mine, everything's mine and the brand is mine, and expect that people will resonate. So that's that, in every decision, there is that.
I'm giggling under my breath because of how true your statements are ringing with me. And how many people think that is community building. Yue, any common mistakes that you've seen in like that initial community building growth?
So I totally agree with Melissa, but another thing that comes to my mind is that like the tools or platforms for community builders to use to kind of manage or organize community, right? So like you could use like Facebook or Facebook community or like Snap community, or maybe an APAC WeChat would be like a thing. So I think choosing the right tool to like gather that community into one spot, I think it's like a really difficult decision to make, because that has to resonate with like the community's like nature of like if they're using Slack more often or if they're using Facebook more often. So Japan itself, people are using more Facebook as like a LinkedIn tool. So we thought that Facebook was a great tool for our community, along with like the Slack community too. But it was a really difficult decision to make. So I'm sure other community builders are facing that issue too.
Yeah. And speaking of tools, this is, you guys are doing a really great job of like segueing into my next question. Because speaking of tools, we have, very unfortunately entered into a time in history where a lot of these things that we're going through right now as a global citizen, global population is unprecedented. We had no time to prepare. Everybody's, thinking on the fly of how we do this and what we do. Even communities that had some online content versus offline content, nobody ever fully did the online thing as a 100%. That's the only thing we're doing right now, because, we're human. Nothing really beats that one-to-one connection, even if it's in a group of 100. So as things have evolved over the last couple of months, how have you seen your communities evolve, and what kind of tools, and maybe we can save that as the second part of this question. So first, let's talk about how have you seen your communities evolve? Yue, I don't know where Melissa is because I can't see her on my screen, but
wow.
Oh, you're still here. Okay.
Really?
Your video went away for a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But if you're there and you can hear
oh,
me,
sorry.
yes. Let's start with you, Melissa.
Okay, can you see me here? Can everyone else
I can
not
see
see
you.
me? Okay, all right.
Okay,
you
maybe
and
it's just
see
me
you.
then.
Yeah. Okay, just in terms of change, so like for me, because my community are tech startup founders, so we're already very well versed in online. The only change I would say is even more happening, and there's things happen much faster. So if I organize an in-person event, I would have to give at least in Australia, okay, we move slowly, at least 2 weeks notice to feel comfortable that I have time to promote it and make sure people will come. But now 1 day notice, at any moment, okay, this is happening tomorrow, and we can get hundreds of people to show up. Because people are just online all the time now.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Yue, how has your community evolved?
So in terms of changes, we're facing, as well as Melissa too, but we're facing a lot of startup founders, right? And I'm sure they're feeling anxious and uncertainty about like this whole thing, because of like the coronavirus and like the economy itself. And they're kind of wanting more sense of community, I think, peer-to-peer like network and kind of helping each other. And because they're facing, some of them are facing maybe pivoting their business model or service offerings, right? So that kind of like sense of communities, I think, getting enforced because of the, especially we're in the time of crisis. That's kind of how I see it.
And what
did you want us to talk about tools?
Yeah, so I was going to say, what tools have both of you leveraged?
We're obviously using networking tools, our communication tools like Zoom and like Slack and Facebook Messengers and stuff like that, obviously. But one thing that we recently implemented is so something like Hopin, or something like the platform we're using right now, but it's called Event Hub. And when we host our pitch events and stuff like that, we have features for people to kind of look for different attendees and go network with them. Because one of the things that startup founders still looking for is to network with different people, right? So like lead generating and like meeting different people at events. And so creating that environment online as well has been something we wanted to implement, and we implemented that tool, and it really worked well, and we're using that. We used it last month, and we're using that this month too.
Yeah. Melissa, anything that's, shed a good light on how you've expanded the way you've used?
No new tools.
Normal tools?
Yeah. I mean, this is my attempt, and now I know what hopping is like. So yeah, the networking function seems great.
Cool.
So.
It is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is a question as well in the chat, which is, to expand on our experience using these different tools. And I would say that I'm basically every week now experimenting with a new tool. We have such a diverse community around the world. So for us, it's like, what's going to work in India? What's going to work in China? What's going to work in Brazil? And then all across Southeast Asia, across all the languages and all the wonderfully stable internet connections everybody has. So a couple of things on the top of my list are Zoom has, just a great feature for breakout rooms, even on the free model. So if you're looking for a way to connect from a big group where you have, 40, 50 people, and then break out into smaller sessions, because that's really what you need to make engagement on online activities a little bit more personal. Okay.
Oh no,
yes, we are.
We're back. Are we back?
The little live thing is there. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm not sure where the audio.
So I actually wanted to answer. I wanted to answer Martha's question. because she asked
yes,
about
please.
how to encourage people to engage on tools. I spent a lot of time thinking about this recently because I had to pick some tools. So so one of the things is really, you need to find a tool that is going to slot into your community's natural sort of work cycle, how they behave already.
Yeah,
right.
It's like, yes, they, like in this current scenario, that they will be willing to try new things because some old things they can't do anymore. But in most of the time, they, you know, there will be a natural resistance to adopt a new thing. So you have to try to slot into them, which means that if you find
Right.
that you have a tool and it requires them to really go out of the usual thing and then sign up to this new thing, and they need to really like onboard it and take the time, then it's either A, like it's not going to work. Like I'm already going to tell you the future, it's not going to work. Or B, you create another thing where, like, say you create a physical event and they are physically there and you force them to take that time to get the training to adopt it. You have to create that force thing. And once, you know, they've onboarded, they're on their way. So unless you create that, okay, if everything's just happening on the line, you want them to sign on to like Mighty Networks and you want them to be like messaging each other on Mighty Networks when they normally haven't done it, it's going to be very hard.
Yeah. And I would say that, you know, the time that we have now, use it to leverage to build an online community so that, like Melissa said, because of the way that we are, they are going to be less resistant to coming onto a tool that naturally fits the way you communicate, which means that going into Amarit's question about what will community look like post COVID-19, hopefully it's a better integrated way of people leveraging both offline and online events, and the excitement and hype and engagement that we are really like actually seeing on online events these days, because we're putting in 100% effort as compared to the 20% we used to, stays, because I think it's such a great way to be able to reach communities and people and places that you really never would be able to. The scale of which you could do it on is just there. So I hope it stays there. Yeah. Do you guys want to add on to that? What do you think the community will? It's a great tone to end on because we've got 3 minutes left. What will community look like post COVID-19?
I think there'll be more stuff online. It'll be more efficient. I greatly look forward to it.
Oh, I hope so.
Like for me, I think there'll be a higher bar.
We are able to connect with and we are able to connect with other people from like overseas, just like us right now. So that's like a huge thing. I think that's like a huge positive side of it.
That is so true. It is absolutely, like these kinds of panels, you know, we generally wouldn't have done with such enthusiasm, I think, before. Mostly we'd be meeting at more offline events and being excited about that. But yeah, I agree.
Right.
On that note, before we say bye and move on to the networking session, is there anything you'd like to leave as kind of a last advice to everybody that's looking to build community in like today? Anything that you've learned over the last couple of months that has proven to be a real good like reflection point in how you've moved forward in your work? Melissa?
I think,
or
you want to go
whoever
first?
had the answer first.
Oh, so I just wanted to note that I always keep in mind that we pay attention to what the community members are looking for and shifting what we can give accordingly, right? So right now, like everyone's looking for peer-to-peer, you know, support. Then we give that kind of platform or environment. And, you know, that kind of thing is, I think, the important factor when it comes to nurturing the community itself. So that's it for me.
Yeah, like one of the other things is just like I have found it's really effective when you set enough framework to empower your community to do like the things that interest them, or to let you know what they want, or to create, you know, like user-generated content. Oh my God, hi, the show is back.
Oh,
wow, it got me in like right at the end. It literally has been on waiting the entire time.
Oh, no. All right, we're gonna give you the floor.
You made it regardless.
Your 2 minutes of what you think community building is and why it's important and what you do.
Oh, okay. Alrighty. shall I talk about it from the point of view like what I think community building is at this particular point in time? Because I think that's probably most relevant for people.
We were ending the session basically on what you've learned over the last couple of months and how you've evolved interacting with your community. So if there's any learnings that you've gotten over the last couple of weeks. I think
the biggest thing for me or for us is like meeting the community where they're at. So lots of people always say like, oh, you know, we've got to start Twitch streaming, or we've got to start this thing, or we've got to go to this conference, or do this virtual event, or make that hackathon, or something happen. And it's kind of just like, but why? Like, which community are you trying to get here? And where is that community? And how can you meet your community where they're at instead of asking everyone to like do something that they're just not comfortable with? So like, for example, like obviously developers and that, and people who are more technical and like, yeah, sure, they might like, you know, switch from YouTube to Twitter or something like that. But most other people are just like, they want to be in an environment where they're at. And I think one of the biggest things right now is meeting people where they're at, but also where they're at mentally and physically. Because everyone's thinking, oh, you know, it's virtual events. We can just like hit everyone with virtual events and everyone's at home and they're all doing nothing. So everyone will be able to participate, whether they're at work or whatever. It's like, well, no, that's not the case. Like people at home, they're looking after families, they're looking after kids. They might be looking after, you know, someone else in the home. They might have to deal with, you know, kids having schoolwork in the house. They might have to deal with, you know, their partner or their spouse now being within the environment. So everything drops, like productivity drops. What you want to do within your spare time drops as well. So I think like having things available is good. So like having things like, you know, free workshops that people can attend and coding courses or whatever happens to be available. But having that expectation that not everyone can do it and just being like, that's okay if you can't do it. This is just here if you can. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And like giving your community that space, because I think a lot of people just need a little bit of extra space. Like some people need more love and care and attention than others. And other people just need time and space. And I think if you're building a community, especially if it's a community around, say, a community of ambassadors or people, and you might have or even like developer advocates, like people within your company, if you usually have like targets and things you've got to hit for those community members, just be lenient on them during this time, because it is such a difficult time for everyone and everyone's in so many different boats. So we just need to be kind to everyone. And like our job as community managers aren't to stand up the top and be like, all right, community, here's what we're going to do today. It's more like, tell me what you need and I'll see what I can supply and how I can help you and resource you. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've kind of taken away from all the community building that I've done.
That is such a great point in saying that, you know, just because everybody looks like they're at home doesn't necessarily mean their schedules have become chiller or more lenient, and the way that you should approach how you're building community, the schedules you're creating, the engagements you're doing should still be super respectful of all of that, and even more because people have so much more on their plate that they're balancing right now in the confines of, you know, where they are.
Yeah, 100%.
I just want to say that, you know, we are going to be doing a makeup session with Michelle. So details on that will be coming out if you were super keen on listening to her insight, which I know I was. So I'm super bummed that you were not part of this, but SaaStock will eventually release that detail.
Waiting the whole time. And then like, you know, 20 minutes later, it eventually came in.
We are sorry. This is our first time with Hopin, and we're so glad that it finally worked. I mean, if you also look at Michelle's epic like backdrop and her setup, you can see that she's a techie. So
I'm not a noob at this stuff, guys.
You have like the coolest background too.
Yeah, you have the 5 screens. We're really sorry that you only came on right now, but we promise you a makeup session, something really cool with Michelle. We're going to communicate that via email. And also, thank you so much, everybody of you ladies. When I was setting up this panel, only thing I looked was for really strong community leaders. I didn't look for the gender. And it just so happened that you all ended up to be female, which is great.
Can we do a quick group photo, Belle?
Yes.
I love
Yeah,
that.
that's right.
Yes.
Yes.
Was this being recorded as well?
Yeah, so this is recorded, and we're also gonna release the recording soon. Just stay tuned on your email. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna jump into the networking. So stay on though. So on your left-hand side, you can see a networking button, which you click, and then you can network. So you get randomized with somebody. Oh, somebody left this already. So you randomly get. She's probably already in the networking. So you can randomly get matched with somebody else in the audience, somebody from us, with somebody, and then you have up to 5 minutes to network with the person. Introduce yourself, tell them what you do, and then just happy networking. Stay tuned also for more webinars, a really cool session with Michelle. Maybe also she can teach us how to get this thing up on top.
I have taught nearly every GitHubber or every hubber how to do this now,
Yes,
as well as
please.
multiple other people. So if you use Zoom, there's a really good way to do it. Otherwise, if you're a little more techie and you have a Windows PC, I can teach you all this kind of stuff. But Zoom's a good stock standard because you can do it within the Zoom environment. So,
And Michelle also does every Wednesday AMAs on her Twitch account. We're going to send you the details if you just want to ask her more things.
Yeah, we literally just finished one about 20 minutes before this happened, and we were talking about raising money, startup founders, what to do at times like this, what virtual events are available, even this one. So I know a few people on here are from my stream, so hi stream people. And then just other random things. So anything you ever want to ask, we're talking about it.
And I will also link all the LinkedIn and also Instagram, Twitter handles of all of our speakers in the email, so you can connect with them, because they're all about building a community and connecting with you. So let's jump into the networking. This is going to be recorded. Just watch out for the email that we're going to send out. And thank you so much for dialing in.
Thank you for having us.
Yay.
All right, see you at networking.
Thank you. This is super fun.
Thank you.